Okay, move on with the agenda. We'll go on to discussions and information items, and we'll talk about the COVID information plan.
Okay, Marianne, could you pull up that slide, please? So, yesterday the COVID-19 survey went out to three stakeholder groups: teachers, students, and parents. And so I think there's, the committee has been meeting weekly. We've been sending out weekly updates. This is obviously taking the front and center attention of the administration, as well as the other, I want to say 13 volunteers that are on.
Is this in the packet?
No, this just came out today. So I'll be referencing, this is just the first 24 hours of the survey. There's obviously 6 more days that this can be completed. Let me rephrase, refocus here, I'm sorry. So the information that's being shared is real-time information. We try to get it out within 2 days of each committee meeting. And the idea of that is just so that the community, as well as the board, as well as the faculty, the staff, can stay up to speed. The guidelines are ever changing. Where this committee was at when we met on the first time at the end of June, and where we are at today on July 14th, several things have already been somewhat changed, whether that's the difference of face shields, the clarification on whether desks need to be 6 feet apart or 3 feet apart. These are all the things that all school districts in Illinois are struggling with, and that you're reading in the paper, you're seeing in local articles, conference calls with the regional offices of education, superintendents association, etc. So what's on the overhead is the first 24 hours. So the reason this wasn't added in the packet is because this is from about 4 o'clock when we sent it out yesterday to 4 o'clock today. Based on these results, there were 3 options provided. And I think the thing that needs to be clarified, and to make sure that the audience watching as well as the audience in attendance, none of these models are set in stone. The idea of putting out this parent survey or survey to the stakeholders was to identify 3 potential models of in-person instruction, which the governor's Restore Illinois plan does describe for Phase 4. That during Phase 4, school districts should make all efforts to do some form of in-person instruction. So the 3 general models that we came up with were kind of like, what would a whole school day look like? And that's the late start, which was option 1. Obviously, we had things to consider on that survey, but the purpose of the late start would be that at least that would be 1 less hour students are not having to wear a mask. Otherwise, that would resemble as close as we thought possible to a traditional school day of 7 periods, lunch periods, and students being in attendance. All students being in attendance. The second option was the half school day. And so one of the largest things that are in the guidelines that all school districts are dealing with is lunch. And with the current Phase 4 guidelines, you can't have more than groups of 50 in one gathering. And so the concern about that is that we have way more than 50 in a traditional lunch period. So Beth Augustine took on the task with some staff members of her department to reformat the master schedule and added 5 additional lunch periods. Now, this isn't something that just needed to be done, as I stated before, for the to deal with COVID. We had lunch overcrowding problems to begin with, and this was something that was on our to-do list. That's been in the back channel. We were trying to figure out a proper way to do it. Well, that got raised to the forefront when we quickly realized that there was no way we could have in-person instruction with lunch periods if we just kept with our current 3 lunch periods. So that was why we revised the master schedule, but we tried to keep it as similar to what the current format is, with 7 periods and then 5 lunch periods. So some of the terminology eventually will need to change to what people are used to, and this will be a format for our master schedule going forward, because we shouldn't have more than 300 kids in a CAF, just to make sure students have enough time to eat and get through the lines. But those were some of the things that we had to adjust for that full master schedule if we were going to go full day. Well, so one of the options that came up was that we could do school for 4 hours and send students home after 4 hours with lunches to go, and we would eliminate that whole risk of having to eat lunch and find places to put kids throughout the building because we couldn't just keep them all in the cafeteria. And so that was the justification of doing a half-day model. Now, this would still have all students in attendance, but we would, like I said, students would come in for periods 1 through 4 on Monday, and then they would come back for 5 through 7 on Tuesday with an hour of office hours if they needed to see a teacher or do any makeup assignments or get any additional intervention. So it roughly came out to about 20 hours a week of in-person instruction. The third option was the half-day also reduces the number of passing periods from 7 to 4. The third option was a reduced enrollment. The committee had discussed, the subcommittee had brought 2 or 3 different models to the overall committee, and we met over the last 2 or 3 weeks and discussed, and trying to come up with a way where we could piece the student attendance in half. So maybe we talked about, do we go with freshmen and sophomores and then juniors and seniors? And the concern about that option was that we have multi-level classes. We have several classes that have mixed enrollments where we have classes with sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So it doesn't necessarily work for us to break it down by grade level. So the committee discussed doing an A through L, M through Z split. And we do recognize that not every class will exactly be split at 50%, but this did provide us pretty close to a half enrollment model. So then the second thing that we had to discuss was whether we wanted those half groups enrollments to come to school for the whole day and every other day. And so there was a lot of discussion that went on with the parents, the teachers, the students. And so one of the concerns that was coming up with one of the models that we had brought up about doing a full 7 periods of half enrollment was that what are the students doing while at home? And would they have 2 to 3 days of no in-person instruction and just doing, it would be like 6 hours or 12 hours of in-person and 12 to 15 hours of remote learning on their own. And so there were some concerns from parents on the committee about having that long of remote learning. So Dr. Freitas worked with the subcommittee. He brought a second plan that talked about 2 half days. So that like the A through L students would come in the morning, there'd be an hour or so break to evacuate, students could take lunches to go, students could go home, there'd be enough time for a second group of students to come in, get their temperatures checked, grab a lunch if they needed to, and then go to class. I still think this third option does present some roadblocks in that we would still have a small pocket of students that would want to grab lunch before they start their afternoon session, and that brings back in that whole eating on campus and having to take your mask off, which we are trying to avoid. So the survey results you see, those are the 3 options that were presented in the survey to the stakeholders. The results you see as the faculty and staff, 7 staff members had the late start as their primary choice, 47 had the half day, and 44 staff members had the A through L, the split day model as their first choice. So roughly around 98 people took the survey in the first 24 hours. From a parent's perspective, 714 parents took it, and kind of as I was anticipating, 30% of the parents want to do a full day of school, 37% of the parents wanted to do a half day of school, and just about 33% of the parents wanted to do some type of reduced enrollment. In regards to the students, 90 students had, in the first 24 hours, 90 students wanted a late start, 231 wanted a half day, and 83 wanted the A through L, M through Z, for a total of 400 students that took the survey. So in total, we had about 1,216 people take the survey in the first 24 hours to give us some direction. The idea with this direction is to give the committee some idea of what the preferred model of in-person instruction is, and then for us to finalize a model. I anticipate that it will be some form of hybrid / half-day model. And my suggestion for that is we need to get some clarification from the Cook County Health Department on the 6 feet or 3 feet. Currently on the ISBE guidelines as of July 9th and frequently asked questions for COVID in-person instruction that I checked today. They're from July 9th was the last update. They said 6 feet when possible and desks do not have to be 6 feet apart. So that's where we were trying to get some concrete guidance from either the state or the Cook County Health Department on whether or not they should be 6 feet or 3 feet apart. If they require 6 feet, I think we would have trouble getting our full enrollment in the building, even for some form of a half-day model. So I do have some ideas that I'm going to bring up with the committee tomorrow that would be a modified version of these things. But I think it's important for parents to understand a few things. One, the models that went out yesterday were just to do a temperature check on your preferences for, no pun intended, on the temperature check piece, but just to see what people's preferences were on in-person instruction. The second thing was to give us some guidance. Please understand that these are not set in stone. We've been sending out weekly safety guidelines that Ms. Smetana, Mr. Mannon, who's present here tonight, have been working with that subcommittee on safety guidelines. Now, unless you're taking the time to read, and we try to keep them to one page, the parents on the committee, I'm in charge of the communications subcommittee, so the 4 parents are working with me on that. We try to keep them to one page, to general bullets, so parents can see, the key facts. But like we had some questions about airflow in the building. So this past communication that went out, there was a bullet added to the bottom. We worked with Joel and our facilities manager about addressing our HVAC models so that we can increase the number of air changes in the building throughout the day to increase the amount of outside air. So we have been addressing little things that parents have been sending in. We do get a lot of individual questions, but we've discussed as a committee that it's probably best that we try to answer those questions through our stakeholder weekly output so that people aren't trying to email individual administrators and then use email responses against the general direction of the committee. The goal is to try to have a final decision by August 3rd. I know there's been some people that have asked, well, why, we're 4 weeks away from opening school. This is not a race. And I think the sooner you put something out will be the sooner you're going to have to change it, because I think, as you've seen on a weekly basis, things are changing, whether it's spikes in certain towns, spikes in certain cities or states. I think there's a lot of things that are going to be changing. And so our plan was to try to get a decision communicated out by August 3rd, and that the board would formally approve our plan at the Tuesday, August 11th board meeting. Now, we traditionally would want to have something communicated to the board first and then communicated to the parents, but the way our board meeting cycle doesn't set up that way. And this is way too early of a board meeting for us to make a final decision. I think this is a very fluid situation, and I think it's just going to take us some time to work through those things. With that being said, we do have a couple of administrators here that I do want to recognize for their work, as well as some of the committee members. Kevin Baldus is our new interim special ed director. So Kevin's working, he has the task of now figuring out, if anybody on the transition committee has a tough job, it's special ed, because then once a model is decided, we have to figure out how we're going to accommodate individual education plans to fit within the number of hours we're in the building. So there will have to be some flexibility built in so that our students with IEP and required service minutes and interventions can still meet those under the model that we're going to put in place. Also present tonight, as I stated, was Dave Mannon in the back. Dave is Assistant Principal of Student Affairs, is working hand in hand with Assistant Superintendent Kristen Smetana and Tricia McVicker, our medical professional on the committee, working on safety guidelines. And so they're being responsible for the things such as hand sanitizer, masks, temperature checks, HVAC, trying to identify how we can make our hallways one-way hallways so when kids come out of class we have a common flow of traffic. So they're working on those types of things. In regards to safety measures, I checked again today. As I stated earlier, I checked on the ISBE guidelines. Masks are required. And unless a student has a designated medical condition, masks will be required, and the school district can work with that student to come up with some other type of face covering or face shield in the event they can't wear a mask. But the governor and the State Board of Education are still requiring masks. I know that was a question earlier in tonight's meeting. Ms. Kylie Lindquist is working with Dr. Freitas on the instructional subcommittee, and they've had the task of putting together all the different models that have gone out in the survey. So one of the questions that came up from some of the parent feedback already in the first 24 hours was why wasn't a full remote model, a plan in the survey? And Kylie, I'll give you a minute to answer any additional questions that may come up, but the first thing we did as a committee is we looked back at Hector's parents, our stakeholder survey that went out at the end of the remote learning in end of fourth quarter. And we addressed as a committee the concerns that occurred, especially with our parents on the subcommittee, that occurred during remote learning in the fourth quarter. So the first thing we actually did was revise the remote learning plan. And we wanted to make sure we had a plan because we believe at some point in time this upcoming school year, there may be a point where we have to go full remote learning. So that was addressed by the committee, and that was the first thing that was addressed by the committee. And we do have a revised remote learning plan. And that remote learning plan is a condensed schedule, but it will have daily face-to-face interactions. We will be requiring staff to do daily virtual lessons online via Zoom or Google Hangout with specific classes each day. And so that was the first thing we addressed, and then the subcommittees have worked through the other models. So I want to thank Kylie for her work with that. I also see that we have some members of the committee. Dan Bonarigo is on the committee. Doug Schultz is on the committee. Mark Helgeson is on the committee. Lindsay Meinl is on the committee. So I want to thank their participation as well. That not only are they representing the faculty, but also representing the RBA and trying to come together with a plan. So I think I've covered everything that has been asked. We have no updates on athletics or activities. We're anticipating an update from the IHSA before the end of July on the status of the fall athletic season. So more information will be shared on that. We have no updates right now in regards to choir and band. I know that's been a lot of the questions we fielded from parents in regards to what's the status of choir and band, because there actually is a large concern of that's when kids are projecting their voice. They could be projecting, with wind instruments or while singing. That could increase the amount of spread of germs. So we're trying to work through some of those things. I think I've addressed everything, but I would like to defer to the administrators in the room that are working with a subcommittee. If there's something I missed, we can take a minute and you could provide any additional updates that need to be provided. Hector, anything from your end?
Yeah, I just wanted to address, thank you, boss, you address everything, but as Dr. Skinkis mentioned a few minutes ago, this is a fluid plan. This is developing based on the feedback. To all the parents, to all the teachers, to the board members, we're listening to you all. When we started this journey, we did not come with an agenda. You guys are our agenda. Your needs are your agenda. Your kids' safety is our agenda. So I want to reinforce to everybody that we are listening to you all, and we are open and willing to revise our options to make sure we deliver the best programming possible.
Ms. Matana, anything? Mr. Mannon? Ms. Lindquist? Mr. Baldus? All right, I'll open it to board questions.
Discussion?
So the question I have is, how prescriptive is what the school does? Is the Illinois State Board of Education going to tell us exactly what we need to do, or will the school have some variability? And is it necessary, do we have to have like our attorneys on board to, if we deviate from anything ISB says, do we have to have our attorneys on board? Like, how precarious?
We are working
Could
with our
speak.
attorneys. Our attorneys are are addressing some of the questions that have been brought up by the RBA reps on the committee about HR issues. We're also addressing with our attorneys student issues for students who are asking about if they don't want to attend, or, do they have to homeschool? Do they have other options? So we have been working through some options like that with our attorneys. The governor's guidelines, there's only a few specific things that are required, like masks, 5 hours of instruction. That instruction can be blended. It could be in-person, independent study, homework, a combination of several things. But the governor did state, and so did the State Board of Education, that a majority of the other items in there are recommendations, and the schools do have flexibility to implement their own plans. Where I think that is going to cause some problems is you will have, you could have a district 5 miles down the road doing one thing, and the district 2 miles up the road doing something completely different, and it's going to become very similar to graduation and the spring, when people were talking about how they're going to do graduations, and then you kind of get, the inboxes get flooded with, well, my nephew's school in Oklahoma is doing this, and this school in North Dakota is doing this. And we've already started to see that from parents and teachers, who have concerns about all the things they want to see in a plan. The one common message that we always try to either start or finish the meeting with, and whether it's the teachers that are on the committee here or the administrators, is I've made very clear to them that we're not going to make everybody happy with whatever model we select. And as you can see just from our parent results in the first 24 hours, we almost have a third split, right? So you're going to have somebody that, is going to feel like they weren't listened to, or they weren't addressed. But we're trying to be as flexible and take all those pieces of information into consideration. I do think I need to make something clear. There were some parents that had submitted emails to Hector and I, like, oh, if we don't like any of these models, can we choose a virtual model? Like, at the end of the day, when the committee does finalize a model for instruction for this upcoming school year, that will be the model of instruction. If we have to work with an individual parent who has a severe student who has a medical issue, to do some accommodations, but we are not offering, some school districts are offering almost like a buffet style where you can choose one or the other. We do not have the resources to do that, and with a high school setting, that would be very difficult to do. So whatever final model or compromise model or reformatted model between these versions gets put together, that will be the model that will be coming back with.
Were incoming ninth graders, students and parents, were they included in the survey?
Yes.
And I know I asked this earlier through an email, but are you guys going, or is the committee going to survey subs?
Ms.
Because
Lindquist?
all three options are really going to require subs for when if teachers are out.
Yes, so I'll use my teacher voice. My administrative assistant is in charge of, she oversees all substitutes, so that comes out of my office. And she is currently in the process of contacting by phone all of the subs who have worked with us in the past to see what their availability is. We already know that some of them have medical concerns and they will not be able to come into the building for the foreseeable future, but we're building right now a list of the subs that we currently have, as well as I'm gonna work, we always have a sub posting out, but I'll work with Kristen to make sure that that is up to date and current, because we are gonna need to build a stable of subs that would be able to come in. So we are exploring some options of how we do that. Right now we're working with our current subs to find out how many of them intend to return.
Could you just share that with us when you get that information?
Sure.
Thank you.
I forgot to mention Miss Augustine is also on the committee as well. I'm sorry, Miss Augustine, you're here to speak on something else. I didn't want to.
So I just want to say, obviously, the health and safety of the students, the faculty, the administration, the parents, the families, the communities, everyone that those people all go home to is paramount in this discussion, right? And I think the committee obviously has been focused on what's the right solution in a very, very fluid environment. So I think that's just a lot of work, and kudos to all the work that's been done. I think it might be helpful, though, for those watching at home just to kind of elaborate again on the subcommittees so people know that there are, you mentioned a few, but there's some specific areas, and then also what is the preferred way of getting questions into the committee? Not flooding Hector's mailbox, your mailbox, our
So
mailbox.
It's okay to send the questions, I'll go backwards in reverse order. So
And then
if I
one more
miss
thing,
something.
then my suggestion is, we probably need, in addition to the weekly update, some type of a FAQ that gets regularly updated, because these questions are going to keep coming up, right?
Correct.
And they're legitimate, they're very personal, this is a very tense time for everyone, and people are struggling looking for answers, so I think the only trick here is to over-communicate, if anything.
So the FAQ was decided by the committee not to put one out till a model was decided, because we feel that no matter what we put out in the FAQ, people are gonna then have questions of why didn't you choose this, or what about this? So we thought it would be easiest to do an FAQ once a model is finalized. We talked about it even a little bit today, that once the model is finalized, like Kristen and I would take care of the FAQ for staff so we can answer their questions, and that we would have another team, a subcommittee, put together an FAQ like what Dr. Freitas, Mr. Mannon, Ms. Lindquist, Ms. Augustine put together an FAQ for students and parents to answer their questions. So we plan on sending that out closer to August 3rd once we think we're getting close to a finalized model. In regards to questions, what I've been doing is with whether it's teachers or parents or community members have sent in things, I say thank you for the email, I'll share it with the committee. Last week I shared a couple of those emails with the committee of here's some of the concerns we've gotten from community members. Here's some of the opinions we've gotten from people about what we're sending out, or their concerns, or the health concerns, or we have some people that submit communications that feel we shouldn't be doing any type of in-person instruction until there's a vaccine. And that's clearly opposite of what the governor and the State Board of Education has sent out. So I do share all those with the committee, so if you send it in to myself or Dr. Freitas, you're going to get a uniform answer that we're going to share it with the committee, and then we're trying to put some form of an answer in those weekly updates so that we're not sending out individual answers. Third one was plans.
Just asked again about the structure of the committee, and so that, because I think that you did a good job of getting a lot of cross-sampling of people, but others have been interested, saying, well, I want to be on the committee. Well, I think
Committees,
there's a fine line there.
Yeah, the committee's already been set. There's 4 parents on the committee. One of those parents is also a health professional. We have, like I said, 5 or 6 administrators. We have 5 or 6 faculty members. We have representatives from the RBA, instructional coaches. And then, so what we have tried to do when we stick to our subcommittees of safety, learning, major events or athletics activities. So like obviously Brendan would handle athletics. Dave Mannon and Aubrey Prince, who represents the instructional coach of the Fine Arts Department, handles activities. All the teachers on the committee work with the instructional coaches, and Kylie and Hector on the learning committee. That's who put together some of these plans. The 4 parents work with me on the communication piece so that we're making sure the communications are hitting the key points with the parent stakeholder group.
Thank you.
And I think the one thing I want to make sure is still clear, because the direction I interpreted from the board in May and in June was the board was committed to doing some form of in-person instruction in some type of model in this upcoming school year. And I just want to make sure, is that still the plan from the board? Because if not, we're putting in a lot of work and a lot of time. And if that's not the goal of the board, I just want to make sure that that's still the plan.
No, so as I see it, we talked about doing, if we had to go to, at-home model, doing that differently, which you addressed. I think we've come up with that backup last resort plan, but as far as I'm concerned, I'll let everybody finish. We did give direction that kids learn better in the classroom. That's I think we found that out pretty clear last spring.
Right.
Yeah, as a board member, I'd like to see the kids, young people, our students come back in a safe way that's been thought out by the committee. What colleges are doing, I still have a student in college, is they're considering ending their semesters by Thanksgiving. So it could be, not that we might be able to do that, but if we had to go to a remote, because people travel over Thanksgiving, that might be a cut point, who knows? But it would be nice to see students together just anecdotally, my grandson hasn't seen anybody in months, and the impact of the students, they're sad.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
sad at home.
No doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see students back into the building as long as all of the particulars are really thought out. Because, like Deanna said, not only student safety, staff safety, everybody who's in this building. But having said that, I think the committee has to be very realistic in expecting parents who are not going to feel comfortable sending their kids to school.
Right.
I think that there have been some districts that, when they surveyed parents, they found a pretty large percentage of parents who have said, nope, not sending my child, not happening. And I think we have to be realistic that I know we can deal with it on a case-by-case basis, but I just hope the committee really discusses that, because that could be a very big reality. I mean, what if we end up with like 20% of our parents who say, nope, not happening, not sending my kid? I mean, I don't want us to be caught off guard if that's the situation. It's the same thing with my question about subs. If 70% of our subs say, nope, not happening, not coming in the building. Well, what are we going to do? So I just want to make sure that we're covering all of our bases, because I do think we are going to have parents that no matter what the committee thinks through,
Right, we're
they're not-
anticipating anywhere from 10 to 15% of probably not coming. And if you think about that, that's my math people on the committee usually help me when we get to these points. But, we're talking that's roughly 240. There might be 240 kids, but if we have 1,400 or 1,300 students that still want to be on campus, we would still do what's best for the majority.
Well, and to your point earlier, someone made it, you're still not going to satisfy everyone. They're still going to want to be here all day, regardless of what the science says, right?
But also, I think I'm fully in support also of all the models, and with, however much the students can be here. I think the fundamental decision to not consider the all-remote learning as an option is really smart, because we know, as you described, if there is a shelter-in-place order or something like that, we've been through it before, we know this could happen, we hope it won't. But just from pure planning logic, I think this is very smart not to throw this in, because it would have is that much more complicated, and because that's not in anybody's control, this could be ordered by the state, and if that happens, that.
Right. We wanted to figure out, and one of the things that was discussed at length on the committee, but especially with the parents, is it's really hard to go full-blown remote when freshmen have never met their teachers and nobody built relationships with their kids. So we know that there's going to be some staff members that have concerns. We know there's some parents that have concerns. But when we did this last year in fourth quarter, you were already working with that group of students for 3 quarters, if it was a year class, or at least 9 weeks as a quarter class. Not only is it tough to be coming to maybe your first high school experience, or you're transferring into a district, but you don't know anybody, and all of a sudden we're going to say, hey, we're going full-blown remote, right? So now you're not building those relationships, you're not building those peer groups. There's the potential of maybe not having athletics or activities, so the social, emotional supports are going to be needed. We recognize that kids need to be on campus, and they need those supports and those things. How that will all look in the final model that's selected is still to be determined. But I thank you for the compliment. Are there any other questions?
More discussion?
I have one more question and comment. I think you mentioned the revision to the remote learning plan. Can we get a presentation on that at a future board meeting? I think it's very important to certainly the parents in the audience, but also to the board.
Yes.
Lessons learned from last spring. I think no one agrees it was a home run. So I think the fact that adjustments were acknowledged, or needed, and then made, I think is very important. And I think understanding what those adjustments were would be very helpful.
Okay. And Kylie is planning on attending the August 9th meeting with the graduation discussion. And so at that meeting, we'll have our finalized plan, as well as so we could show both our remote plan and then our final in-person plan, so that those are put together. The board will see both of those when you approve that resolution.
Thank you.
And that resolution that's on tonight's agenda, that was a recommendation from our legal counsel, so that there's a differencing in legal opinions on whether or not the board has to adjust all their policies if they're changing how a traditional school day looks and how we're playing school, and in the event we need to go remote, things like that. So we wanted to put it on there so you saw it as a first read, and then what we'll have to do in August is we'll drop in the modified in-person plan and the remote learning plan, so in the event it's needed. This provides the board some additional protections in regards to whether or not we have to change policies, some of the Tort Immunity Act stuff, those types of things. Did I cover that right, Kristen? Those are the two main ones, or was there a third one? Thought
There was a third one. Technically, the superintendent is the one that by statute has to approve it, but the attorney felt strongly that by the Board of Education approving it, it would certainly carry more weight.
All right. If we would, so parents that are listening, one of the things we'll put out in that FAQ, but grading will be returning to normal. Expectations for completing classwork will return to normal. This will become as close that we can becoming normal to playing school again. So I forgot to mention that as well.
All right.
Okay.
All right.